Well, hello, dear viewers and dear listeners, and welcome to the third season of the Global Advocate Career Podcast. I'm so excited. I'm going to be featuring phenomenal individuals who you should definitely know. And today is no different. I'd love to introduce to you a dear person that's near to my heart. I admire him so much. Okay. And he just happens to also be a dear relative. Ladies and gentlemen, I just want to introduce you to Mr. Ron Skeete. Ron, who is a director of Pathway of Hope Poverty Alleviation Initiative for the U.S. Southern Territory for the Salvation Army. Ron, welcome to the Global Advocate Career Podcast.
Thank you, thank you. I feel honored to be here with you.
Oh, it's just an honor. I've been wanting to have you on the show for a while now, and I'm so glad that this worked out. How are you?
Tell me anything. I've been dying to get on this show for a while, ever since you started it, but I've been paying attention from afar, and it's been great. I've been well, no complaints. God is good, but we've had a tough couple of years as a world, right? So I think what you're doing as the global advocate comes right on time.
Thank you, Ron. Thank you so much. Now you're based. Where are you right now? Where are you?
So I'm in Atlanta,
Mhm.
but my work keeps me in the Southern Territory for the Salvation Army. With Pathway of Hope, it's our national poverty alleviation initiative with the goal of transforming the lives of 100,000 families by increasing their
Wow.
hope and stability by 2030. And we are doing really well on there. But that has me supporting about 16 entities here in the South. So from Washington, D.C. down to Florida, from Georgia across to Texas, pretty much. All the states in the Southern Territory are who I support through this.
So you're busy. You're busy. Now wait, hold on for a minute, because you weren't born and raised in Georgia.
No,
How were you
no.
born and raised?
Well, I tell folks, if you want to know Ron Skeete, you gotta know the three B's, right? So I'm a black man. I got all the good, bad, and ugly that comes along with that. I am a Bajan, meaning I am from Barbadian descent or from the island of Barbados. Most folks were famous now because of Rihanna. And the last one is I'm from Brooklyn, the planet Brooklyn in New York. Woo-hoo. That's about all you need to know, right? So yes, originally from Brooklyn, New York.
Yeah, you're from Brooklyn. I grew up in Washington Heights, but our family is from Barbados, right? On my mom's
Yes,
side, right? And
yes.
otherwise known as Bajans. Now, tell
That's a
me,
whole nother episode.
that's a whole other episode. Yeah.
Yeah.
But tell me, what was it like growing up in Brooklyn in a West Indian household?
Wow. That's a good place to start. So my experience growing up in Brooklyn was phenomenal. As the song says, New York, New York, if you could make it there, you could make it anywhere. I think I've lived that experience.
Mm-hmm.
But growing up, I came up, in the 70s and 80s when crack was starting to take effect
Right.
in New York City and devastate communities. So, what I told folks is that, you know, every day, and this as well, every day growing up during that time in New York City, you would see um, a lot of things that we now know as trauma, right? Even though you didn't experience it in your home or maybe in your family, we saw these things every day, whether it was crime, violence, murder, drugs, and the ill effects of that every day. So growing up in a Caribbean household, as they say, the Bajans are more British than the British, right?
Yeah.
There was definitely, I was blessed to come up in a God-fearing household, a household that was structured and loving. My dad is in the home. My mom and dad, they were together until he passed a couple of years ago. So I benefited from that as well.
Mm-hmm.
And then, having to come out of that environment and deal with the mean city streets, right? And learn how to live and navigate through that. And, what I say is that helped me figure out where I needed to go. And that's how I found what I call, I guess, my ministry in life, kind of working in the nonprofit world.
Yeah, well, you were in Brooklyn. I was growing up in northern Manhattan, and it's interesting because, yes, of course, my neighborhood had drug dealers. I remember one drug dealer in particular, but he actually kept the block, one block away, quite neat. And I
Uh-huh.
remember it was actually one of the safest blocks,
Uh-huh.
Uh,
Hmm.
I remember our neighborhood got a lot of flack because of Giuliani, right? Giuliani said that Washington Heights was one of the worst places to be, which was actually not the case because most of the people purchasing the drugs were coming from across the river,
Yes, they were.
right? So, but yeah, growing up in the 70s in Manhattan and in New York City and Brooklyn, I really think is a badge of honor because
Oh yeah.
those not to be nostalgic, but New York City I think had this quality to it that perhaps we
That's
don't
right.
see anymore, right?
Like
Um,
nowhere else.
like
And especially
nowhere else.
during that time. So, when I tell my story and do some workshops with young people, I talk about $1 million blocks. So I grew up a period of time in Brownsville, Brooklyn. So
Right.
it was known and in the newspaper as $1 million blocks. It's not because of the real estate value.
Mm.
It's not because millionaires lived there, but it was because it generated millions of dollars for the justice system in the state of New York. So in that sort of 15 block radius, the number of people that were being locked up and incarcerated for drug dealing, drug related sales generated millions of dollars for the state in terms of juvenile justice to, just sort of normal, the prison system in New York. And, I feel blessed to have been able to navigate that and escape that, that neighborhood. Some of you may know of Mike Tyson, the fearless
Sure.
boxer. He lived kind of like right around the corner from where I grew up.
Yeah, yeah, we definitely, there's no question, drug dealing is quite lucrative on the judicial
Well,
side and also on the business
well,
side.
yeah. And here's the interesting thing, right? Because you talked about the aspect where you lived in northern Manhattan,
Hmm.
but when we look at it now, right, and where you see, what's happening with the legalization of marijuana uh, in certain areas, and what you and I both know is that many of the folks that were involved in that had very limited options, right? And then we know from recent history, there was some intentionality to communities like ours being flooded with certain illicit drugs. But at the same time, you had some of the brightest minds, the best entrepreneurs that were using the vehicle that they had available to them. I'm not making excuses for them, but what I am saying is that there were tangible skills that have been
Sure.
used on Wall Street and other places to succeed. But
Hmm.
because there was a target in our communities, it was not a lever for success. It was a lever to go right to jail, and the other things that are associated with drug dealing, right?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. But as you mentioned, your upbringing was faith-based and you had some great role models. You went on to college, you pursued your bachelor's in economics, but then you pursued your master's in education. Why the switch?
Okay. That relates back to Brooklyn. So what I always tell folks is when I went to college, my dream is I was going to do three things. I was going to work for a bank, I was going to wear a suit to work every day, and I was going to be rich. So what I tell folks is one out of three ain't bad. So I still wear a suit to work every day, but the other two, again, I talk about finding my ministry. When I got back from college, I went to
Mhm.
Stony Brook in Long Island where I met my lovely wife, right? College sweethearts. But when I was going through the streets, going to interviews, when I came back, I realized during those 4 years that I went away to college, I changed. But a lot of my peers who did not get the chance to go to college, they did not. So they were kind of stuck in the same sort of, gravitational pull of poverty and what came along with those neighborhoods,
Right.
unfortunately. So as I was walking past them every day, going to an interview and so forth, and they would always shout me out. Nobody made fun of me, because like you said, in our communities, even though there may have been some negative elements and definitely perceived negatively from the outside, they were very positive and supportive of us. So they were always like, go ahead, Ron. Yeah, you got a good head on your shoulders. You know, you don't need to get involved in this. You need to keep doing this. And as I was doing that and going to interview at, you know, certain banks and financial places, it didn't sit right with my spirit. It just didn't, I didn't feel this connection. I felt like the folks on the other side of the desk were kind of grading me and testing me, like I had to prove myself beyond what my degree and my academics were. Like they were giving me a litmus test because they didn't relate to me. And then I had the chance to interview with a small nonprofit called the Science Skills Center in Brooklyn. They now have a wonderful high school that still exists to this day, producing great students. But, you know, I started there and I fell in love with it. You know, it just resonated with me. And like I said, I found that that was my ministry, and I've been in the nonprofit world ever since.
Yeah, so you moved on after getting your master's. You moved on and worked for 11 years at the Madison Square Boys and Girls Club. Now,
Yes.
that was 96, from 1996 to 2007. That's a long period of time. And check out the things that happened during that time. Notorious B.I.G. was killed in 97. Clinton was reelected and acquitted. Michael Jackson came out with his last album.
Yes.
9/11 happened, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. What's your biggest memory of those years at the Boys and Girls?
Wow. You just threw me in a whole different direction.
Well, there's a lot of things that happened during that time, Ron. You were there.
There was. And two other pivotal moments that happened was Rodney King and the O.J. Simpson case during that time. But I'll talk about Boys and Girls Club. Man, it is the largest, best youth service organization in the world. And they serve millions of young people. Nobody reaches as many young people as the Boys and Girls Club. And what I would say is one of my fondest memories, or the best takeaway from my experience with the Boys and Girls Club, is that they create a space that's welcoming to young people like nobody else can. I mean, young people take ownership and they feel like it's their home. I used to, you know, I've run clubs in various areas in some of the toughest neighborhoods, and folks would often ask, well, why don't you have security at the doors or metal detectors? Even at a time when the school systems had them. And pretty much Boys and Girls Clubs, you won't find a security guard, or you won't find metal detectors and so forth. And why? Because this was the young people's home away from home, and they wanted to make sure that it was safe, and they felt safer sometimes than even at home in some cases. So that's definitely a takeaway. The other takeaway was, when I went in, I said, I'm only going to be here for a certain amount of time. And around the time when I said I was going to leave, say about 4 or 5 years in, that's when my first sort of set of young people started to come back. So, you know, you believe in these things, you want to do the right thing. And then there's a period of time when the rubber meets the road. So when these young people started coming back as high school graduates and college graduates, I was like, this thing really works. And that committed me to saying, look, no, this is a part of my life. I'm going to stay here. I'm still connected with many of those young people to this day.
So that pretty much, you know, solidified your life in the nonprofit, I think, you know, those 11 years, right? Now, what propelled you to relocate, right? So at this point, right, you're with the sweetheart of your dreams, right, from college. Have you already gotten married at this point?
Yes.
Okay.
Sidebar. Can we pause for a second?
Oh, sure. One second. So when did you decide that you wanted to relocate, right? You were boys and girls for 11 years. Now you're married, right? You're probably thinking about a family. And so what is it that, even though, you know, you're definitely a product of Brooklyn, you know, went away, came back, what is it that propelled you to relocate and move out of the city?
Okay. I see where you're going, global advocate. I see where you're going. You're good at what you do. So yeah, a couple of things. I transitioned from what I went to school for, right? And I kind of found out what was my passion. I was fortunate because everybody doesn't get the chance to do that. And when I relocated, that decision was based on a couple of things. So My wife and I were married a couple of years, and we just had our first child, my daughter Trinity. And we were doing well. My wife is in human resources, so we were both at pivotal places in our career, and we were moving up, getting promotions and things of that nature. But as we had a family, it wasn't necessarily what we envisioned. So there was a lot of hustle and bustle. So I give folks the example, we're leaving the house, dropping my daughter off to daycare at say 6:30 in the morning, getting home. I was working the Boys and Girls Club, so I was working late into the evenings. My wife was doing the same thing. And we're getting home or picking her up from daycare. Actually was a friend, right? Because we had a friend who would pick my daughter up from daycare, picking her up from her house, maybe like 8, 9 o'clock, getting home, eating dinner at 10, 11 o'clock, settling down, getting her settled at 12. And we were like, look, the money is good, job is good, but this can't be sustainable. And this is not what we wanted for our family, right? And then also my wife had family here in Atlanta, and we would come visit them from time to time. We were like, wow, this is really nice. It's a different way of living, different quality of life. And then the real estate prices that we saw were incredible. We're like, you can get this for this amount of money. So that's where we started to think about it, right? And then we started looking at the long term, right? So the vision for our family. And vision is always very important. So the long-term vision for our family was saying, look, if we wanted them to get into schools that we knew that would be good for them, we would either pay for private school or we would pay to move to a different place in the city or the outskirts of the city, Long Island, things of that nature.
Sure.
And, at that time, real estate would have been, probably had to pay like maybe close to $1 million for a home. So we were like, we could try that. And at the same time, our New York City life and work life was very strenuous, right? We were successful, but it's a pace in New York, and you know it well. That's like nonstop, right? Yes. So what we did is make that decision for a quality of life change, really for our family. I tell folks, if we didn't have children, we would have never had left. But because we have children, we wanted to make that move, and we figured, hey, it's now or never, because that was the right time. If we waited longer, it was like we probably wouldn't do it. But for that reason, there are no regrets. I always say that. I think I've even put some years back on my life, just from jumping out of the hustle and bustle. Now, we still work hard, but the quality of life and the family support and experience from the workforce down here is different, and it's supportive of families out here.
Yeah, the quality of life is definitely, when you move out of the city, I myself can attest to that. You sort of, it helps you put things into perspective on what really matters, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Can I tell you something funny?
Please.
And sometimes you only realize it, right, when you leave and go back, right?
Oh yeah.
So two things. One, you don't realize the hum of growing up in the city, right? So out here, the first week, we're like, something's wrong because it was just so quiet. Right? And then this is the biggest thing, right? You go back to New York and you're like, wait a second. Even in front of the finest restaurants in Manhattan, we put the garbage right out on the street. And it's like, I never noticed that or saw anything wrong with that until I moved away and went back. I'm like, wow, you got the finest restaurants in Manhattan, and right on that sidewalk, you got bags of garbage right out front.
Yeah. You definitely, things stand out, right? Things stand out when you come back into the city. I mean, there's a part of me that's always going to be a New Yorker, right?
Of course.
But understandably so, you've got your family, you relocate down to Georgia. Now let's talk a little bit about Atlanta, the city that you live in. It's got about a little bit over 500,000 people as a population, about over 506 million, and 18.3% are under 18. So this demographic, right, is one that you particularly work with, right, Ron? Tell us about your current position.
Well, in the current role, we deal, so I think, again, I'm a God-fearing man, so there was kind of a trajectory here. So when I first started out working with academic supports for young people, and then Boys and Girls Club, more of a variety of what's happening. I've also had the chance to work with a pregnancy prevention initiative under the Children's Aid Society across multiple states. And then I got involved as a volunteer for charter schools. And now my work is about poverty alleviation, which kind of brings the entire family together, but
Sure.
also all of those supports from nonprofits, foundations, and then also what it takes for everybody working in collaboration to help families succeed. So it impacts our work greatly. I'm able to leverage those relationships and bring them in strategically for this work. And then even my volunteer work as well. So I think, I'm a proud member of 100 Black Men, which is a global organization focused on 4 key areas. We call it our 4 for the future:
Okay.
education, economic empowerment, health and wellness, and last but definitely not least, mentoring. We call ourselves a mentoring organization, and we actually have a trademark program, Mentoring the 100 Way, that's transforming the lives of young people across the world.
Yeah, Atlanta, the numbers are stark, right? 20.8% of the population live below the poverty line. Why do you think that's the case, Ron?
Well, yeah, and it's also come out in probably about 3 years ago, where the income and economic disparities are greater here, some of the greatest disparities than any place else in the nation. And I think, if you do some of the history there with Maynard Jackson and some of the historical work that he and some of the civil rights leaders, Atlanta, they say, is the birthplace of the civil rights movement,
Right.
have done so much to stratify things. They've helped a lot, but that connection is something that has not been solidified the way that it could be. And what do I mean by that? You still have very obvious pockets of poverty, just kind of promoted by zip codes and redlining and a lot of those other things that have been systemic. I'm proud to have been part of organizations and collaborations working to fight against that. I was just on a conversation earlier today about helping one of the school districts, and there's a north side and south side experience, right, where the north side has all the resources, the best property values, and of course the tax levy dollars that go into the school system, and then the south side doesn't. And always seems to be underrepresented. So I think it starts with schools, and having good, strong schools, equitable schools where that level of support is the same across the board, or let me not say the same, it's equitable, right? So meaning each area geographically gets the resources that they need is needed, right? And of course, we're in the South, right? So when we think about the impact and the trauma of slavery, yes, it still exists. As I tell folks many times, who think, oh, well, that's behind us. We had a Black president, and all this good stuff. I say, listen, to our non-people of color friends, I say, for most of the Black folks that today, when you look at their last name and even their first name, it is still connected to a slave owner.
Sure.
So that tells you the impact still exists. And I think the crux are our schools. So as our schools are working to build equity and help our students grow and learn, that's going to help us close the gap. But they need a lot more focus and a lot more help. It's kind of been, what's a good word? I don't have a good word for it, but it's taken a while, right? And as many times as schools can move forward, there seems to be setbacks. For my work with schools, we need some continuity around leadership, right? So the revolving door for superintendents doesn't help, right? Each person comes in with their new plan. But if we can get some long-term stability, that helps. As a matter of fact, that's one of the reasons why we moved to Gwinnett when we came here, because it was one of the strongest school districts in Georgia. And they also had a superintendent with one of the longest tenures in the whole United States. He was here for, I believe, almost 30 years.
Yeah, I know that you represent 100 Black Men for for Gwinnett County, right, Ron? Am I correct about that?
Yes,
Okay. And
yes,
so,
yes.
um, which seems very diverse in itself, right? In my research, Gwinnett County has a large non-citizen population that's Latino.
See,
So,
you do your homework. Wow. Yes.
so how are you, the issues that you mentioned and that are being faced right now, and not only in Georgia and Atlanta, but all over the country, that don't only affect African Americans and Black individuals, but brown individuals as well. So
Yes.
how is that? How are you working with those communities, the Asian, and the Asian community is dealing with it right now too, and the Latino community?
Yeah. So actually, as 100 Black men, our focus is people of color and communities of color. We don't discriminate, but that's our focus, right? So that includes the Black, the Browns, Asian communities, you name it. Depending on where our programs were, we've actually had, non-people of color in those programs there as well. Like I said, we don't
Really?
discriminate, but we let you know what our focus is, right? And who we're here to serve. So it's been interesting, and I'm glad you asked that, Michelle, because what we're actually seeing now is a lot of positive results. So we get some support from the United Way of Greater Atlanta, which has been tremendous. And they have the Child Wellbeing Index. And a lot of those pockets and targeted places we are reaching out to serve because they are non-English speaking areas, our Latinx brothers and sisters. So we look to engage them as well. And, the other part of that in terms of, what we saw is that under the last presidential administration, we saw some turmoil, right? Because particularly for a lot of folks, when you talk about non-citizenship and a lot of folks that were even, here for the right reasons and legally, we saw folks go underground. We saw it, whether it was sort of really directly, if they didn't have the right legal status, but even if they did, but they were very nervous and afraid of the environment during the last 4 years, it was terrible here. I mean, we saw industries. There's a strip here in an area called Buford Drive. And we saw businesses just sort of close up because where they were prominent and thriving economic communities, right, with a lot of Latino businesses and things of that nature, and even Asian businesses as well. We saw the traffic there go down dramatically because of that. People were scared and nervous about being pulled over, stopped, and just really their rights being infringed upon in America, one of the greatest countries on the face of the earth. So it's been an
Yes.
interesting few years.
Interesting is an understatement, Ron. Georgia has been. I'm gonna clear my throat here. Georgia has seen quite a bit of attention.
Yes. So the civil rights movement is not over. I joke around with my friends, but they're like, "What's going on in Georgia?" I'm like, first of all, that's why you sent me here, right? To make some changes. So we were happy in November with our results, really to mobilize. And again, hats off to Stacey Abrams, who is the hero of this and representation. Definitely well-deserved accolades. She did what we must do. When you're faced with a challenge, you get to work. We're not going to look for excuses. It's unfortunate that many in this country, when you saw people get to work together and collaborate and achieve a goal, that people automatically assume when it comes to Black and brown folks that there was some cheating underway. I don't know where that comes from, but all folks on both sides, bipartisan in Georgia, showed that there was not anything that should not have occurred that wasn't legal.
Right.
And you take a step forward and all of a sudden somebody wants to knock you back 2 times. So in terms of what just happened in the legislature, we're back to work again, right? So whether we can get this turned over and support at the national or federal level, we are still fighting for everybody who legally can to get represented. So if that means we got to produce state ID for everybody and make sure that occurs, we're going to do that as well. Whatever it takes, we're not going to be stopped.
whatever it takes, and you're doing good work. Tell us about your upcoming projects. What else are you doing?
Yeah,
Because it sounds like you're busy as it is, but what else is going on?
yeah. So a couple of things with 100 Black Men. This month is powerful for us because we do our annual Youth Achievement Celebration, where we put the spotlight on over 100 young men across 3 counties who are doing
Wow.
exceptional work in our Men of Tomorrow leadership program. It's virtual. It's been virtual this year and last year, of course, due to the pandemic, but it's still a great time. It'll be recorded as well, so folks can watch it at their leisure. We got celebrities, Denzel Whitaker, not Denzel Washington, Denzel Whitaker, who was in Black Panther and on Nickelodeon, a lot of other projects will be there. He's also a member of our chapter, and he's going to be there as our one of our keynote speakers. Chelsea McNeil, who's a local weatherman who's very popular, will be there. A number of celebrities will be there. But, you know, one of the things that we know is that recognition counts. And this is our opportunity every year to show our young men that they matter, their community loves them, and we support their success. When you look at some of the research in different groups, it shows that there's something that's important in the life of a young person and an adult that's called a recovery message. That when something negative occurs in your life, it's just a moment in time and you can recover and still succeed. And you know which group receives that message the least? Young Black males.
Yes.
So that's what we're here to change, and we appreciate that. Matter of fact, later on tonight, we're actually going to have a special session that we call, you know, we respond to the time. So with the George Floyd case and the Chauvin verdict, even before the verdict came down, we had scheduled this session because we wanted to be preemptive to make sure that our young men had, and our families had a space to vent, had a space to hear their concerns and let their concerns out, let the trauma out, whether they gotta cry, cuss, whatever. We wanted to give them that space for that and then start focusing on solutions. So we're actually gonna have law enforcement officials of color on that call tonight there as well. So we can not only let the trauma out, but we can start to heal and talk about what do we do from this point on to improve those relationships and make sure that nobody else loses their life senselessly at the hands of police or even in our communities in general.
Yeah, I mean, that's fantastic that you're involving law enforcement. I think a big way is to take the mystery and a lot of the issues that one way is to know how to communicate with law enforcement and to know what your rights are. So I think that that's fantastic that you're doing that. What else do you have going on, Ron?
Yeah, so one of the other things, I think you know about this, a little project of mine that I'm turning 50 this year, right? So in about 238 more shopping days, December 16th, in case anybody is listening, I will turn 50. So in my 50th year, I've decided to kind of try and go all out, right? God willing, hopefully I'll have more time, but who knows? So at this time, I'm gonna use it as a milestone. So, you know, I got a lot of thoughts going around in this crazy head. So I got a couple of books in me. So I'm actually looking, hopefully, pray for me, to release my first book around Mother's Day. And it's focusing on single moms, raising boys. In my career, you know, I've seen the look of despair, the hesitancy, and even fear in the eyes of single moms raising young men. You know, you hear that a lot that, oh, a woman can't teach a boy how to be a man or raise a man. And that's just not true. And when you think about all the successful men, and particularly men of color who have been raised by a single mom, you know, you hear them all the time. Shout out to mom, I'm buying mom a house. They can, but there are different supports that they need to connect with. So this book is really a testament to those great mothers who have young men that they're trying to raise, and it gives them some good tips and practical supports to help them on their journey to raise successful men.
Well, I'm thrilled to hear that you're about to release your first book. Global Advocate Career Podcast. Can't wait to review it and get you back to promote it, Ron. I'm so proud of you. I'm so impressed with everything that you're doing. Well,
thank you.
Before we close, there's a section of my podcast called Wait, What? Where I ask some interesting questions. And
okay. You didn't prepare me for this, but okay.
which hopefully will elicit some interesting answers. Are you ready?
Okay. Okay. Yes.
Okay. Gwinnett County is named after Button Gwinnett, one of the signatories of the Declaration of Independence. Is that true or is that false?
That is true.
You are correct. It is true. Interesting name, Button, but I'm not going to speak ill of the dead. Okay, here's a question. The former governor of Barbados, John Skeete, who owned the mangrove plantation, may very well be a distant ancestor of ours. True or false?
Wow. You're bringing this up, so I guess I'm going to say true.
I'm going to say true, Ron. Every point leads to the fact that the former governor who died in 1833 may very well be a previous ancestor. Stay tuned.
Lord.
It's crazy.
I feel like I'm on a DNA show now. You know, we gotta vet that legacy first.
We're gonna have to vet it, right? We're gonna have to vet it. Next question. DeKalb County in Georgia and DeKalb Avenue in Brooklyn was named after Baron Johann DeKalb of Germany. True or false?
Wow. I'm just gonna say false just for the sake of saying false.
True. You see how you can't escape Brooklyn?
I can't. You know, it's interesting. I didn't even make those connections before because I live right around the corner from DeKalb in Brooklyn, right?
Yeah, apparently he died an honorable death and was recognized by George Washington, hence the names that were given in his
Yeah, I love it.
Who knew?
You're teaching on these things too. Look at that. Look at you.
Here's another question. Isley Brothers or the Commodores?
First of all, I thought it was supposed to only be 3 questions, but maybe that was just in my head. Isley Brothers. I got to go Isley Brothers. Did you see the verses?
Listen, I didn't know. Was it?
Oh, you got to see the verses that they did with the Isley Brothers and Earth, Wind, and Fire.
Ooh, I got to see that.
Yes.
I did see the verses with Snoop Dogg and DMX.
So did I. Yes. Classic.
It was pretty good.
Classic. Shout out to DMX.
Shout out. Barry White or Barry Gibb?
Barry White.
Yeah.
I thought you was gonna say what's the other guy? Isaac Hayes.
Hayes. Yeah, that's a hard one right there. That's a hard one. Isaac Hayes lost me after he joined Scientology, but we won't. True or false? Last question.
Okay.
In Malaysia, the expensive muskmelon fruit is massaged and surrounded by classical music to stimulate growth. Is that true?
True.
You are absolutely correct. It is true. And the process is called the tamafuki.
The tamafuki. Okay. I might have to do that with some fruit. I might do a little tamafuki with my fruit here too.
That's right. That's right. You can tell your beautiful wife you believe in tamafuki.
I will. I can't believe you teach on these podcasts as well. Look at that.
Well, I'm glad you enjoyed yourself because it was such a pleasure having you.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah.
Listen,
tell me.
You are really good at what you do. You know, I've known you in different roles, and you've always been impactful in any of those roles. But this, in terms of what's happening with the Global Advocate Career Podcast, is just powerful. I mean, people need this. God works in mysterious ways, especially with what's happening in the pandemic. People need this right now.
Yeah, it's just a pleasure to do it. I remember I was like, well, because I've done acting on the side. I was like, I can't wait to do roles where, I play a reporter. And then I was like, you know what? I'll just have my own podcast and talk to people. So
that's right.
And also recognizing individuals that are really doing important work that other people should know about. And Ron, you're on the top of that list.
Thanks.
We got to have you come back to talk more about your book,
Would
what
love to.
what inspired you even more, and really my best wishes to your beautiful wife and kids.
Thank you so much, Michelle. It's been a pleasure being here.
Oh, it's such a pleasure. Don't go anywhere. Thank you, dear listeners. Thank you, dear viewers. Thank you all for tuning in. Welcome to another season. Please write and let me know what you think. Give me your feedback. Tell a friend. Until next time.
Take care.